Have you ever felt like you just don't get art, Norma?
Sometimes, definitely. It can be hard to grasp what the artist is trying to convey.
Exactly. I remember when I first encountered a piece of postmodern art. It was a hodgepodge of familiar items, yet they were put together in such a bizarre way.
Sounds intriguing. What was the artwork like?
Well, it was a composition of everyday objects like a television, a lamp, a baseball bat. But they were assembled in a way that was intentionally disorderly and seemingly nonsensical.
Wow, that must have been quite impactful.
Absolutely. I remember thinking, is this even art? It seemed so different from what I knew of traditional art forms. It was mesmerizing, though, left me with a strange mix of confusion and fascination.
That's the interesting thing about postmodern art. It tends to challenge our preconceptions of what constitutes art, doesn't it?
I've come to understand that now. At the time, I felt that I might not be artistic enough because it contradicted what I knew about art. But that's the beauty of postmodern art. It's all about questioning the norms and exploring new perspectives.
Ching, you mentioned earlier about your encounter with a postmodern artwork. It's an excellent example of contradiction inherent in this style. The crux of postmodern art lies in its critique and mockery of the established norms of what is considered acceptable art. It rebukes the idea of originality and the artist as a singular genius. Sometimes it goes as far as appropriating or borrowing from past artwork.
So, it's establishing a new discourse in art?
Yes, and in very unconventional ways. It believes in an active viewer who engages with, interprets and even adds to the artwork's meaning. It even gets a bit paradoxical, as it dismisses the idea of the art as sacred, yet the pieces become celebrated icons within the postmodern canon.
How does that contrast with modern art?
Well, unlike postmodernism that challenges and deconstructs, modernist art was all about embracing originality, purity, and a singular interpretation. There was an authoritative voice, a singular meaning to the artwork. Modernists believed in the ability of art to express universal truths, while postmodernists argue that there is no one absolute truth, just multiple perspectives.
Sounds like the philosophies are polar opposite.
They are indeed. And this dramatic shift in perspective has fundamentally altered our understanding of art and its purpose. But the beauty of postmodernism lies in this chaos and uncertainty, the freedom it provides both artists and viewers to interact and interpret art.
Norma, let's delve into something that has always puzzled me regarding postmodern art, the shift from aesthetics to concepts.
Sure, it's a complex transformation that actually dismantles traditional art paradigms. This shift illuminates the crux of postmodern belief that art does not just reside in the physical form, but in the idea itself.
So, the focus is not on the physical appeal anymore?
Right. Not in the traditional sense, at least. Don't get me wrong, aesthetics remain a factor, but they become secondary to the overall concept. The meaning, context, and idea behind the artwork are paramount, thereby liberating art from the shackles of being physically pleasing.
It's quite rebellious in a way, don't you think?
Rebellious indeed. The ethos of postmodernism tends to be anything goes. This shift allowed the artist to experiment, take risks, and even defy traditional aesthetics. It's as if art was given a new radical voice that broke the rules to create its own language.
It's almost like art was redefined altogether.
Exactly, Ching. Some would argue it's a democratization of art. In throwing away the rulebook, postmodernists invite alternative voices, visions, and interpretations. There's a certain freedom to how we perceive and interpret art.
It's fascinating how just a shift in perspective can revolutionize a whole discipline. Norma, art has often been seen as exclusive, hasn't it? Bound by certain standards and practices. However, from what we're uncovering about postmodern art, there seems to be an inherent principle of inclusion.
Absolutely, Ching. In traditional art, there has been a tendency to elevate high art, often deemed only accessible to the affluent or educated sections of society. But postmodern art flips this elitist concept on its head.
Elitist, that's the word. Art should not be elitist. It's an expression of human emotion, experiences, isn't it? How can it be confined to a certain class or group?
Exactly. Postmodernism challenged the art world to its core, No longer were high and low art distinct, but they could coexist and even intermingle. Works of art could take inspiration from anything, be it an old painting in a museum or a postcard from a gift shop.
That's amazing. A form of art that incorporates the very essence of culture society, the mundane and the grandeur. But how does it democratize art, as you mentioned before?
Democratization of art here refers to making art available in a way that everyone can understand, interpret, and conclude their own meaning. In postmodern art, everyone's perspective holds value. It provides a diverse, broad scope for artists and audiences alike, irrespective of their background, belief system, or art knowledge. It embraces the unexpected, the paradoxical, promoting inclusivity and freedom of artistic expression, thus effectively democratizing art. Ching, have you heard of Dadaism?
A little, Norma. I think it was an art movement that originated during the First World War, isn't it?
Exactly, Ching. It was a form of protest against the horrors of World War I. Dadaists believed the reason and logic of bourgeois capitalist society had led people into war, so they expressed their disdain through chaotic and nonsensical artworks. Scribbles, collages, sound poetry, performances, anything went.
Sounds a lot like postmodern art.
It does. That's because Dadaism is one of the important influences for postmodern art. It issued a direct challenge to this idea of crafted skill, upheld for centuries as the mark of an artist. It embraced the absurd and chaotic. The anti-establishment sentiment, the rejection of controlled craftsmanship in favour of absurdity, the freedom, these were all picked up by the postmodernists, given a new context, and thus, a new life.
So the skepticism and contradiction we were discussing earlier could trace back to Dadaism.
Indeed. It's fascinating that what was then considered as anti-art now forms the foundation of an influential art movement, isn't it?
Do you think postmodern art streamed from pop art as well, Norma?
In many ways, yes. You see, pop art brought everyday objects into the artistic spotlight. It drew from the media, advertising, and popular culture to create art.
Like the soup cans and dollar bills by Warhol?
Exactly. By focusing on mundane objects, artists questioned what art was supposed to be. They blurred the line between artistic and banal.
Sounds like another potential avenue for postmodern artists to draw influence from.
Indeed. Although pop art doesn't carry the same philosophical weight as postmodernism, its democratization of art, reducing the gap between high and low culture, aligns with the postmodern ethos.
So pop art's exploration of popular culture as art paved the way for postmodernists to further question the conventional understanding of art, right?
Very much so, Ching. Postmodern art took what pop art started a step further, by even more radically questioning the definition, scope and purpose of art, thereby changing its footprint in our society forever. Now let's talk about Cindy Sherman, a powerful voice in postmodern art. Sherman shook the world with her series, Film Stills.
I've read about her, but isn't it rare for a series to become that influential?
Right, and this one was particularly impactful due to the challenging messages it conveyed. In the Film Stills series, Sherman disturbs the idea of originality. She presents herself as the subject of each work, yet there's a twist. She's not showing natural shots of herself, but instead portraying fictional characters, like stars of B-movie, film noirs, and European art house films.
That's a clever way to turn the tables, don't you think? Taking existing ideas and characters, then refashioning them in her own image.
Yes, it's a brilliant commentary on the malleability of identity. Continuously changing character, she becomes an artifice, an embodiment of the objectification that women often face.
So her art serves as a mirror of society's biases and expectations. That's a lot to take from a series of film stills.
Indeed, Cindy Sherman's work manages to be both self-reflective and a critique of societal norms, disrupting traditional perspectives of femininity.
Norma, wouldn't it be interesting to talk about Jeff Koons next?
Certainly another cornerstone of postmodern art. Let's unravel the charm behind his balloon dog, a strikingly postmodern piece.
Oh yes, I recall seeing it first in a museum and being completely flabbergasted. A giant metallic balloon dog amidst classical Renaissance art.
That's the beauty of Koons, challenging the norms of good taste and breaking the artistic exclusivity. Balloon Dog, taking an everyday object, a child's toy, and translating it into a high-value art piece. It's an enormous, bright, shiny, stainless steel stuff of dreams.
Really? That's quite subversive if you think about it. A mockery of the seriousness of high art, in a sense.
Indeed, and it's also important to note that Koons often creates these pieces on an outsized scale, further distorting our perception of the mundane. In terms of craftsmanship, the artwork is impeccable, the surface of the balloon dog so pristine that it reflects everything in the room.
Mirroring the world around it, just like how postmodern art reflects our society, isn't it?
How exactly, Ching? These pieces by Jeff Koons may appear simplistic, even juvenile on the surface, but they certainly hold a profound commentary on consumer culture and the high-low art distinction.
I must say, Norma, learning about these artists and their audacious vision makes me marvel at their audacity. It gives me a newfound respect for their craft.
Absolutely, Ching. There's always something to admire in a work that takes your presuppositions, plays with them, and makes you see something old in a completely new light. Have you ever come across Cindy Sherman's Untitled series, Ching?
Not particularly. Tell me more about her and her work.
She is one of the leading figures in the postmodern movement. In her series Untitled Film Stills, she took black and white photos of herself, assuming various roles and settings that mimic films of the 1950s and 60s.
Interesting. So she played different characters?
Yes, absolutely. The brilliance comes from the fact that she isn't just pretending to be different characters. Instead, she's challenging the way women are represented in mainstream media, distorting the traditional female stereotypes.
Oh, wow, that sounds like an artistic form of rebellion. But Norma, I'm curious, how does she do that?
The beauty is in the imitation. She creates scenarios, roles and tropes that women often find themselves in, setting up a stage and then parodying them. Sherman raises these stereotypes to a level that becomes almost comical or deranged, forcing us to start questioning them. The characters she portrays range from housewives to librarians, bombshells to girls next door, you name it.
That's rather empowering. A fine example of how art can be a voice of change, so every picture is more like a narrative, a story in itself.
Absolutely. With each photograph, she presents a mini-drama, and we, as viewers, are left to decipher and interpret the story. It stands as a testament to how well she understands the medium and manipulates it to elucidate her themes. It opened a wide new vista in photography, which was mostly used as a medium to replicate the real.
Sounds like she used her artistry to trigger discussions on societal norms and conventions. Quite remarkable. Sherman's work makes me see postmodern art in a whole new light. All right, Norma. Shall we now delve into another influential figure in postmodern art? Jeff Koons, have you heard much about him?
Yes, Ching. In fact, Jeff Koons is perhaps one of the most well-known names of the postmodern era. His artwork, Michael Jackson and Bubbles, is a great one to discuss that embody postmodern aesthetics and opinions.
That sounds intriguing. Can you elaborate more on this particular artwork?
Simply put, Michael Jackson and Bubbles is a life-sized porcelain sculpture of the pop icon Michael Jackson, cuddling with his pet chimpanzee, Bubbles. It's one of Koons's most recognisably postmodern works. He uses his art as commentaries on taste, consumerism, and celebrity culture.
Interesting. A sculpture deifying a celebrity? Could Koons be pointing towards the fallacy of idol worship?
Perhaps. Many see this work as an incisive critique of the Vanity Fair that was the 80s and 90s. It underscores the mass production of fame and its intertwining with consumer culture. Yet simultaneously, its glossy finish and delicately crafted details underscore a sense of reverence, indicating that Koons himself might be part of the adulating masses.
Michael Jackson and Bubbles sounds like a prime example of how postmodern art challenged cultural norms, and it also has a certain timeless quality about it. The celebrity obsession it reflects upon is just as prevalent today as when it was first created.
Exactly, Ching. Going beyond conventional art forms, Koons uses his art to mirror society back at itself, to provoke thought and to display a certain ironic self-awareness. His work is a reminder of the constant changing nature of beauty, taste, and culture. Ching, thinking about the broader impact of postmodernism, We've been discussing Koons and his critique on our consumer culture, but this essence of postmodern art has expanded into far more than just sculptures or paintings. Can you guess some other areas of visual communication it has seeped into?
Interesting question, Norma. Perhaps photography? I'm sure there must be more, but can't seem to pinpoint them.
Spot on with photography, but think even broader. Postmodernism's influence can be caught in elements of graphic design and advertising too, twirling them around its little rebellion finger.
Graphic design, that's fascinating. It's hard to believe something that began within the confines of art, slowly adorning other territories. Could you exemplify? How does postmodern art influence these areas?
Absolutely. Let's start with graphic design. Just as we've seen in postmodern artworks denying all rules, postmodern graphic design too disregards unison. It embraces discordance, overlapping fonts and images, odd shapes, and a general sense of controlled chaos. It aimed to generate a viewer's response, much like the art we were discussing.
So could Norma's taste of a dish and her painting arguably be equally chaotic then?
Hut? Well, you've surely tasted my cooking effort, Ching. While I can't vouch for the chaos they both share, I will own up to the passion. Moving on, advertising, much like postmodern visual art, consciously blurs the line between high art and low art, reality and fantasy, juxtaposing images and texts in a layered, non-linear fashion. It makes the ad more engaging, pushing viewers to find connections and meanings.
Norma, it seems like postmodernism is a remarkably disruptive force that questions and upends norms across platforms. This transition appears to embrace a broader societal context rather than limiting itself to mere art production.
Well interpreted, Ching. Postmodernism has indeed percolated into far more places than its original roots would suggest, inviting people from every walk of life to question, engage, and redefine the norms of their environments.
Norma, bringing to the centre stage our discussion on how postmodern art has shaped our environment, let's mull over its inclusivity. It has brought art out of the elite galleries, making it more accessible. Don't you think it's a kind of revolution in the art realm?
That's certainly a point, Ching. One could say postmodernism's rebellious nature shook the art world, quite literally taking it to the streets.
You mean it roots for the democratisation of art?
Exactly, Ching. It blurred the lines between highbrow and lowbrow art. It questioned who gets to decide what is art and who gets to create it. This liberal movement poured into the public space, beyond the galleries and studios. Art was no longer the birthright of traditional artists. Everyone could create and perceive it as they wished.
And this would presumably make art more relatable to a diverse audience, right?
Spot on, Ching. The democratisation of art brought about by postmodernism transformed art from an elite commodity to a public treasure. The everyday life became a canvas. The simple individual became an artist. And art began speaking the language of the people.
Sounds like it opened endless possibilities, not just for established artists, but also for people who wanted art to be a part of their life, but who were always kept out due to its exclusivity. It really is intriguing to think about how art came out of the galleries and graced our streets, our lives.
Speaking about art being accessible, it's fascinating to think about the impact of social media in this context. A platform like Instagram, don't you think it mirrors postmodernism?
Interesting point, Norma, but how so?
Just notice how Instagram fosters individual expressions of creativity. It's a global platform where everyone can be an artist, share their unique take on aesthetics, much like the postmodern art itself. It's almost like a digital extension of street art.
And not just Instagram, Norma. What about the remix culture on platforms like TikTok?
Absolutely, Ching. Now that's another perfect example. Much like how postmodern art challenges the concept of originality through decentering authorship, TikTok trends often show the same spirit of recontextualization. A dance trend, for example, starts with one person, yet it spreads across the globe with thousands of reinterpretations.
Social media certainly creates a democratized canvas for expression. But don't we risk blurring the lines between art and self-promotion?
That's a fair concern, Ching. Yet it's interesting to see how social media has managed to borrow distinct elements of postmodernism, openness, inclusivity, and the confronting of established norms, to transform the way we perceive and create content today.
Now, What's intriguing is where postmodernism is heading, don't you think?
Definitely. The future is always an interesting topic, especially with art.
It's fascinating to see the shifts and trends in art. I've been reading a bit about post-digital art. Have you heard of it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. Post-digital art refers to art that critiques or outright rejects digital technology.
Right. I'm curious, does it embody the same spirit of defiance and innovation that postmodernism inspires?
Well, interestingly, yes. Although post-digital and postmodern art may appear opposed, given the strong connection between the digital and the modern, post-digital art actually has a lot in common with postmodernism. It often works by taking familiar digital phenomena and either exaggerating them, decontextualizing them, or presenting them in unexpected ways, which is much like postmodern art's approach to the traditionally artistic.
That's pretty thought-provoking. It's like the evolution of rebellion within art itself, finding new ways to push boundaries and challenge conventions, just like postmodernism did with modernism.
Exactly. It's a reminder that art movements never stay static. They're always evolving, responding to and shaping the world we live in.
To me, it's amazing how art always finds a way to reflect the zeitgeist, whether it's by challenging conventions or by embracing a new medium. It's a testament to creativity and the human spirit.
Continuing with our topic, the postmodern aesthetic remains prevalent today, especially as we plunge deeper into the digital age.
Digital age? You mean like online platforms?
Correct, Ching. Digital platforms such as Instagram and the recent explosion of NFTs are concrete manifestations of the postmodern aesthetic.
Could you explain the association between Instagram and postmodern art?
Sure, Instagram is a social media platform favourites for postmodern artists. This platform allows them to challenge traditional art definitions and concepts, just as postmodernists did. It used humour, parody, and exaggeration to overlap high and low culture, just as postmodern art incorporates elements from popular and mass culture.
That's intriguing. But what about NFTs? How do they factor in?
NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, which have recently been quite buzzworthy in the art world, also link tightly to postmodernism. They're a form of digital art, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. NFTs blur the lines between original and copy, and challenge our preconceived notions about ownership, value, and authenticity, very much in the spirit of postmodernism.
Wow, so it's like postmodernism continues to evolve through these new digital platforms.
Right? And it shows how postmodernism isn't just about chaotic defiance, it's about adaptability, experimentation, and above all, pushing boundaries within art.